Welcome to Spooky Ass Shit. I am your host, Eric Dwinells, and tonight I have a bit of an unusual episode because I recorded this episode about a week back with my nephew, Tyler, and we're going to talk about The Undertaker, WWE wrestler and legend. Don't be turned off if you're not a wrestling fan, though. I think you can still get some enjoyment out of this episode. But when I recorded it, there were a few audio issues, so I'm going back. I'm adding in some commentary that I'm recording now, like I said, about a week later. And so you might notice a little difference in sound levels, or you might notice that I'm talking and then my nephew gets kind of quiet. That's because he's not actually here at this point. But I think this is kind of like an episode remix before you've heard the original episode. So, that said, let's go ahead and enjoy talking about the time The Undertaker took on the Underfaker. Welcome to Spooky Ass Shit. I am your host, Eric Dwinells, and I am joined tonight by my nephew, Tyler Clapp.
I'm back on once again.
Here we are.
And I'm actually prepared this time. I have background knowledge in the stuff we're talking about tonight.
Well, so do I, and that is good because my foreground knowledge was left on the other computer. I took copious notes about this subject and left it on the computer that is still sitting in my apartment. So, tonight we are going completely off the top of my head. Tonight we are talking about wrestling, but don't let that turn you off if you're not a wrestling fan, because we are going to explain all the little details that you need to know to enjoy and ponder what this match could have meant, because we are talking tonight about SummerSlam 1994. We are talking about Undertaker versus Undertaker, or Undertaker versus Underfaker.
Faker.
So that is the subject for tonight. And before we get into it, of course, I need to direct you all to the show's website. That is spookyas.com or spookyasshit.com. They both take you to the same place. That is the show's blog page. From there, you can listen to each and every episode, including the ones no longer available on iTunes or other streaming services. And you can also find links to all of our social media. We are at Spooky Ass Shit on both Twitter and Instagram. And you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/spookyas. Don't forget to join the Spookaroos, our secret closed group, while you're there. And one more thing. It's still June, so I'm still doing my fundraising event. That is the show's GoFundMe page. If you have a dime, a dollar, $1 million, and you want to spread some cheer around my birthday, the end of June, then this is the perfect thing for you to do. Go to gofundme.com/spookaroos19, and you can donate as much as you see fit to help get some new equipment for the show and to help me improve my street performing as well and just keep the lights on here in general. So, with all that out of the way, now I want to say, Tyler, wrestling is something that I was super, super into when I was a kid, and I'm only half-heartedly into now as an adult. I don't really watch it.
Yeah.
I do come over here for WrestleMania
Once
every
a year.
year.
Yep.
But I can't tell you the last time I watched Monday Night Raw, but it was probably a good 20 years ago.
Me neither.
But when I was a kid, like I would say probably 95, 96 is when I stopped really watching.
Yeah.
But before that, from like 85 till then, so a good 10-year span, I was all in, which might not be the best term to use when we're talking about WWE these days, but I was all in.
Yeah.
And I still stay knowledgeable because I still watch a lot of YouTube videos about wrestling. And I usually try to watch like old school stuff, but then, I'll end up getting what culture video pops up next. And, I still find it interesting, you know? Now, let's see. We are talking about 1994.
Yes.
So in the summer of 94, I would have just turned 13.
Okay.
So really, I was 12 during most of the build-up to this match.
Mm-hmm. So the how I watched this match originally was I was just starting getting into wrestling. I think I might have been 8 or 9, and you gave me the 3-disc Undertaker collection DVD. and it was on that DVD. And as an 8 or 9-year-old, I was captivated by this match, and as the Undertaker in general.
Well, that's the thing. Like I said, I watch a lot of YouTube videos, and it seems like a lot of commentators, are saying, and commentators are saying that this was a terrible idea, the match is shit, and everyone was crazy for doing this. Mm-hmm. But that's not the way I remember it feeling at the time.
Not at all. Not at all.
I mean, you weren't there at the time.
No, I wasn't there at the time.
But in a way, you experienced it in a similar vein, but without all the build-up. I think, as I did.
Yeah, if I watched it probably 2 years down the line, I would have. I agree, it would have sucked.
Now, like I said, I saw this when I was 13 years old. But the thing, let's go back further than that. People need to remember that this was before the internet. Mm-hmm. Is before the WWE Network, certainly.
Yes. Where
you had everything at your fingertips and you could just go back and watch something. And it was before the death of kayfabe.
Yes.
And what is kayfabe? Kayfabe, according to Wikipedia, is the portrayal of staged events within the industry of wrestling as real or true events, specifically the portrayal of competition, rivalries, and relationships between the wrestlers as being genuine, not staged or predetermined in any way, shape, or form. So back in the day, the idea was that everybody was supposed to think that wrestling was real, even if you didn't. I mean, as we're talking about a zombie man wrestling in the ring, I think most people caught on pretty quick that it wasn't exactly real. But still, within the world of wrestling, this was a given circumstance that we were to believe was real. In modern times, they say that kayfabe is dead because nobody is pretending that what actually happens in the ring is really happening in real life, and that these competitors really hate each other, and that the storylines are real and all that. That was all blown apart in the late 90s, essentially with the Montreal Screwjob, which is a whole other thing. But if you're a wrestling fan, you know what I'm talking about. Earlier than that, this was the time period where wrestling, you were supposed to believe that it was real. Yeah. And I remember your mother, who was sitting right here in the studio where we are recording. I remember her, telling me that, like, oh, wrestling's so dumb. How can you watch this? It's clearly not real. And I was like, a little kid, like 6 or 7.
Yeah, she said the same thing to me. So
yeah, and I was like, but at the time, I wanted to believe that it was real.
Yeah.
So I was like, of course it's real. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And I remember it was an episode where Slick got his suit cut up, probably by Brutus Beefcake. I don't remember the exact details. And he was like flopping all around and going crazy. And my sister was like, you really think that's how someone would react? And why like other people would just stand around while this other guy was cutting this guy's clothes off? And I was like, well, listen, you don't understand this universe. And I was right in a way, because it is a universe of its own. In fact, they even call it the WWE universe. But it was WWF back in these days. Mm-hmm. Now, into this cartoonish universe steps the Undertaker.
Yes, a menacing 6
foot and 8 or 9.
8 or 9, yeah.
Tall,
menacing figure, all dressed in black, coming out to a funeral march.
Yeah, and he is. If you don't know the Undertaker, you clearly haven't watched wrestling in the past almost 30 years now.
You don't have to watch wrestling to know who the Undertaker, I believe.
Yeah, but he dresses like an old Western. Originally, like he was supposed to look like an Undertaker, but an old timey like Western.
Exactly. A lot of people during that time had part-time jobs while they were wrestling.
Right. It
like a dentist. Or
the early 90s.
Dumpster driver.
The early 90s was the time of gimmicks, right?
Yeah.
So it wasn't so surprising to see this, but even then, this was an unusual gimmick because he was supposed to be a like zombie Undertaker from the Old West,
who also like legitimately made caskets for his opponents,
right? And he brought in the early days, he used to carry a body bag to the ring, and when he beat someone, he would put them in the body bag, zip it up, toss them over his shoulder, and walk off with them. Mm-hmm. Presumably to bury them in the coffins that he was shown to make. Now, when he was first introduced, he was brought in by the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, which in wrestling terminology would be considered a heel or a bad guy wrestler. $1 Million Man looked like Kenny Rogers. My mom had a big crush on him because of that, and she always used to say, he looks just like Kenny Rogers. So handsome. And his whole gimmick was that his money could buy anything and, whatever. So he has a match at Survivor Series, which is a big annual pay-per-view that WWF did at the time, well, still do to this day. Back then, it used to be a series of matches with teams.
5-on-5, usually.
Yeah, and so Ted DiBiase said, I've got my regular partners, but I also have a surprise mystery partner. And usually that means it's going to be an old wrestler coming back, or someone who was injured coming back for the first time in months or something. So he says, all right, it's time to reveal my mystery partner, The Undertaker. And this is his first appearance. Yeah. So everyone's like, well, who the fuck is this guy? But he comes out, and like we said, he's 6'8", 6'9".
Yeah.
Dressed like a old Western mortician.
You can see people in the crowd, like, obviously, especially the kids, but they look legitimately like, who's this?
Yeah. He was a creepy looking dude. And they pushed him pretty big almost right away because he had this big match, and then eventually he fought with Hulk Hogan.
Yep.
And he beat Hulk Hogan.
Yeah. For
the championship. For 6 days.
I thought that lasted less than 4 days, but 6 days. Awesome.
Then they had a rematch, and it had a funky ending, and then the title was stripped, and that led to the Royal Rumble winner becoming the new champion. Hello, Ric Flair. But that's a separate story from what we're talking about. We're just giving you a little history on the Undertaker. Now, he was a bad guy. Mm-hmm. And so when he was introduced, he was managed by Brother Love.
Yep.
Who's a guy named Bruce Pritchard in real life, who we're going to hear more from later on, because I listened to a shoot interview that he did about the Undertaker versus Undertaker match. And that was his manager at first, but very soon after that, they switched to a guy, appropriately enough, named Paul Bearer.
Very clever.
Now, I didn't get that at the time, but I remember my mom explaining to me what the joke was about that name. And so, yes, he was managed by Paul Bearer, who was an overweight guy. I'm trying to think of who he looks like, but I guess he's kind of unique looking.
Yeah, I would say he's very unique.
Yeah, he's a big guy. He's got about 100 chins.
Yep.
And also no chin. It's strange, but that's the truth. And he had deep set eyes, and he talked in a very high-pitched voice.
Very high-pitched, yes.
I'll play a little clip here maybe of him talking so I don't have to do impersonation.
Yeah, it's a hard one to do.
Welcome. Oh, yes. Welcome to my funeral parlor. The doors are always open just for you.
All right, so that's what he sounded like.
All right.
That's my beautiful clip right there. Now, eventually, not too long after all of this, The Undertaker actually became a good guy or a babyface in wrestling terminology. And this was accomplished by, he was working with Jake the Snake Roberts, who had been a babyface and recently turned heel. And by the way, when he turned heel, he really turned heel. He even put his hands on Macho Man's manager, Miss Elizabeth, and then attacked Macho Man with a cobra.
That's right.
That is messed up. You don't do either of those things.
He put a snake in one of her gifts
at the wedding. Yeah. But we're not here to talk about Jake the Snake, although that would be a good topic someday too.
Yeah.
But Jake the Snake was feuding with Macho Man and Elizabeth because of all this, and he was going to hit one of them with a steel chair as soon as they got backstage. And he said, I don't care which one comes through that door first. I'm going to deck him with this chair right on the crown. And he was about to do it, and it would have been Miss Elizabeth because she came through first. But the Undertaker was there, and he grabbed the chair from behind, stopping the attack. And then later on, the two men confront each other, and Jake Roberts says, whose side are you on anyway? And the Undertaker replies,
not yours.
That's right. And suddenly, he's a good guy. Now, as a good guy, he has lots of feuds. He's feuding with the stable managed by a guy named Harvey Whippleman. And this includes the sensation from Japan, although, of course, not really from Japan, Yokozuna.
Yes.
And Yokozuna is an even more rotund gentleman.
Yes.
They billed him as over 600 pounds.
Yeah.
And that probably wasn't too far off.
No, not too far off.
But he was supposed to be a sumo wrestler from Japan. He was actually, I'm blanking on the name. Samoan, yes. He was actually a Samoan gentleman, part of the legendary families of Samoan wrestlers, whole lineage you can get into. But they had a big feud. They clashed at the Royal Rumble in January of 94 in a casket match.
Yes, and this was also unbelievable to my 8 and 9-year-old mind what happened post-match.
We're going to get to that in a second, but I just want to talk about this build-up too, because they showed the Undertaker, building the casket, and it was a double-wide casket.
Yeah.
Because Yokozuna was a gentleman of size. Mm-hmm. And the idea of a casket match, for those who don't know, is that the only way you can win the match is not by pinning your opponent 1, 2, 3 like normal, or making him submit, or disqualification. There's no disqualification. There's no submission. There's no 3 count. The only way you can win is put your opponent in the coffin and seal the lid. That's it. It's not just enough to put him in the coffin. You got to seal the lid too.
Yeah.
So this was the match. But of course, Yokozuna, being a heel, he cheated. And all of Harvey Whippleman's gang, which was like all the heels in the WWF at the time, came running out to help Yokozuna beat on the Undertaker, throw him in the casket, and then Bam Bam Bigelow quickly sprawls himself on top of it.
Yes.
Bam Bam,
Yes.
also a big gentleman.
Big man.
The beast from the East, the pride of New Jersey, Bam Bam Bigelow. He sprawls himself out on top, and Yokozuna wins the match. Now, this was pretty shocking.
Yes.
Because a casket match, you would figure the Undertaker's going to win. By this time...
Of course. He made it himself.
By this time, I'm old enough to know that wrestling is not exactly, real.
But it's not like today where oh, this guy's gonna, be big. This guy's getting the push from backstage,
Yeah. It was still, it was as cartoonish as it was and everything. You still suspended your disbelief and everything and just had a good time with it, which is what you're supposed to do, right? So, this was a big deal. And I remember watching this pay-per-view live when it happened with my friends. We must have had like a sleepover or something to watch it. And we were all blown away, as you alluded to earlier, by the end of the match, which when you watch it, you can find it on Network Now or on YouTube, and it looks so cheesy and lame. And even at the time, it kind of did too.
Okay.
But
on the DVD set that you gave me, okay, let's explain what happened.
Okay, go for it.
So they're about to roll the casket out, and on the big screen up above, you see the Undertaker, who's like passed out in the casket, and then his head whips forward, and he says, blah, 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 I'm going to come back and haunt you, I'm the Undertaker, to something to that effect.
His spirit will always remain.
Yeah, okay, even better.
And he will return as the Undertaker reborn.
Yes. And then he gets, lightning strikes the coffin or something, and he begins to float into the air, suspended by...
Wires.
Wires, yes. There we go. And on the DVD set that you got me, it was not the best picture quality, because I think this might have been before, really good HD.
And before HD at all. Yes.
Yeah, probably. And I was watching this on not the best laptop, because I think that was the only DVD player we had in the house. And I could not see for the life of me either the wires or really the Undertaker himself.
I think they did that intentionally, though.
Okay. Because they were like, oh, the commentator is probably like Heenan and Gorilla maybe. They were like, oh, he's floating in the air. And I could barely make it out, but I was like, he's floating in the air. I believe this. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was really cool.
I think they kept that purposely dark because, of course, it was not really the Undertaker.
Yeah.
Being hoisted up. Do you know who it was? And
I don't know who it was.
Shoot, that was the former rocker himself, Marty Jannetty.
Nice.
For those
Good
of you that know
him.
Wrestling. That was his other big spot.
Yeah.
Okay, so you left out the best part of that. And as you said, they're wheeling out the Undertaker. He turns. I don't know if you said that. They don't, of course, this doesn't happen in the casket. I mean, it does, but it's not the physical person in the casket.
No.
It's up on the Titantron,
Yeah.
which is the big video display that you see the entrance, videos and stuff on. And so it looks like it's a shot live from the casket being broadcast over the big screen.
Of course, as it would be.
Yeah. Well, the Undertaker thought ahead, and he built a little camera into the casket,
He does,
just in case.
He lines the coffin with plush mats. Also.
Yeah. Well, he cares.
He does. He does care.
And on the screen, like you said, lightning strikes, but then the Undertaker turns into a photo negative.
Yes, yeah.
And then ascends, but the picture on the screen goes up.
Yeah.
To match the physical Undertaker being lifted up out of the screen, right? In theory. And taken to heaven, maybe?
I feel like the Undertaker would be going the other way, but
I mean, maybe not hell exactly, but not heaven, like not right away.
Yeah.
You know? I know we're not supposed to have purgatory anymore.
Yeah.
I grew up with the idea of purgatory, and the Undertaker's at least got to heal, chill his heels.
Wait a little while.
Yeah. Okay, so the Undertaker disappears for months, and we're going to get, let me say this. What I want to do first is go through, even though we kind of have broken kayfabe a bit here, I want to go through it as it's presented on TV. So just straight. Then we're going to shoot.
All right.
Which in wrestling terms means we're going to be real. We're going to talk about what was really going on.
Yep, real life.
The behind the scenes. So, in kayfabe, meaning the imaginary world that we're all supposed to believe in as wrestling fans and wrestlers, and that we're supposed to promote and believe in. The Undertaker is out of business because he's dead, I guess.
I'd say dead because they use the term resurrected.
Yeah, so he's gone. And he's gone for a while because they don't actually mention him again until after WrestleMania. He doesn't appear at WrestleMania that year.
No.
And then right after WrestleMania, Ted DiBiase is filmed in a vignette, meaning, he's not in a wrestling ring. This is an outside filmed segment that they show on TV. He's at a cemetery, and he's saying, "Oh, everyone keeps saying the Undertaker's gone forever, but he said he'd be back, and I'm the $1 Million Man, and if anyone can bring him back, it's me, because I'm the one who brought him in the first time, and I will bring him back, and he will be my servant, and he will crush my enemies, and I will be the WWF champion." Ha 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 ha. Something like that.
Yeah.
2 weeks later, Paul Bearer, Undertaker's manager, appears and says, "That's not true. Ted DiBiase could not be in contact with the Undertaker because I can't get in contact with the Undertaker. I don't feel his presence anymore. He's not with us. He's gone."
And this was largely signified through an urn.
Yes. So the Undertaker, yes, that's something we forgot to mention. Paul Bearer used to carry an urn all the time. And when the Undertaker was getting the worst of it in a match, Paul Bearer would hold up the urn as if it was a source of power.
Yes.
And the Undertaker would be, sprawled out on the mat, and then he would sit up suddenly like Michael Myers in Halloween. Yep. And he'd be impervious to pain now. So Paul Bearer says, the Undertaker is gone, and I can't get in contact with him, and I've been trying, and if I can't reach him, nobody can. Ted DiBiase says, "Au contraire, mon frère. With my money and my connections, I can get anything done, and I'll prove it to you next week on the Heartbreak Hotel." What's the Heartbreak Hotel? That is a shitty interview segment that was part of the wrestling show. They did a few of these. It started with Roddy Piper.
It started at the very top and then just slowly decreased.
The original and the best. Roddy Piper had Piper's Pit, where he was a wrestler interviewing other wrestlers, and it was supposed to be like a talk show kind of format.
Yeah.
And then there was several others, but Shawn Michaels, the Heartbreak Kid, had the Heartbreak Hotel. So he brings out Ted DiBiase. Ted DiBiase says, "I told you people I would bring the Undertaker back. I brought him in here the first time, and guess what? I've got him. He's right here. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back, The Undertaker." Undertaker's music plays, and by music we mean the gongs, the bells, and then you hear the funeral march, ding, 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 much slower than that, but that's the one. And so he comes out, and it does appear to be The Undertaker. Have you seen this clip in particular?
I have not.
Okay. Now, he does look like The Undertaker. We're trying to keep kayfabe here, so we'll just say that. However, there's commentators, right?
Yep.
On this, and there's always a good guy and there's always a bad guy commentator, pretty much, right? And so the good guy commentators, they always are skeptical of the bad guy wrestlers. So they're saying, well, that's probably not the real Undertaker, and Paul Bearer says it can't be him. So, but the heel commentator's like, that's the Undertaker, all right. Of course, Ted DiBiase can bring him back. He's the man. Yeah. So no matter what show we're talking about, that's what's going on underneath all of this. So the Undertaker's back, but Paul Bearer says, no, that's not the real Undertaker. It can't be. Still can't make contact with him. This Undertaker, Ted DiBiase's, goes on to wrestle matches, and he comes out. He wrestles like the Undertaker. His entrance is like the Undertaker. He only talks, I think, just that one time, and it was in the Heartbreak Hotel interview segment. At the very end, he says a few words, and it sounds like the Undertaker.
Okay.
So maybe this really is the guy, right? And he's definitely a big dude. He's taller than most of the other guys, and so he's got the tattoos like the Undertaker had on his arms. Mm-hmm. So you're thinking, okay, all right. But Paul Bearer is saying no. Paul Bearer comes out to ringside to say that's not the Undertaker. He holds up the urn. The Undertaker in the ring doesn't respond at all. But he does kind of look towards Paul Bearer, and like maybe he's considering going with him a little bit. But then Ted DiBiase comes, and he holds up a wad of money.
That's right.
And the Undertaker in the ring responds to that more. So he goes for that. We get more interviews. There's one where the Undertaker and Ted DiBiase are on the King's Court. Another interview segment hosted by Jerry the King Lawler this time. And Paul Bearer comes out to confront them, saying, that's not the real Undertaker. I know the real Undertaker. I've finally gotten in contact with him. And he's going to come back at SummerSlam, and he's going to destroy this imposter. And so Ted DiBiase, of course, says, I'll show you the power of the Undertaker. Get him. So the Undertaker in the ring starts to choke Paul Bearer. As he does, lights go out. Undertaker's theme plays for a few seconds. Mm-hmm. Lights flicker back on. Paul Bearer is outside of the ring. And he is safe. The three men in the ring, Jerry Lawler, Ted DiBiase, Undertaker, all look dumbfounded. And meanwhile, Paul Bearer is outside the ring saying, oh, he's back. Can't you feel him? He's back. My Undertaker's back. And he's, so now the match is set for SummerSlam.
Is this before or after the Where's the Undertaker vignettes?
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up because that's something I forgot to mention. And a very important part of this.
It is, yeah.
While this is it's right around the same time, maybe slightly before. There are these vignettes, as you say, where people are asking, where's the Undertaker? I'm going to play one or two of them right now, actually.
Yeah, they had some.
Most unbelievable thing happened the other day. Sitting here and stopped traffic for a funeral procession. The hearse goes by. What falls out the back? The coffin, right in the middle of the street. It opens up. The guy sits up. It's the Undertaker. He gets up, looks around a little bit, and walks off over into the park and disappears. Unbelievable.
Yeah, they had some popular guy. I mean, he means nothing to me.
Okay, the man you are talking about is Leslie Nielsen, who was a very popular comedic actor at that time, and he'd been a very popular actor for a while because in the 70s he made a movie called Airplane, which he starred
I've
in.
seen bits and pieces of Airplane.
Yes, Shirley, you can't be serious. I am serious, and don't call me Shirley. Those kind of jokes.
Yep.
All through the movie. And he was also famous for the Naked Gun movies.
Never seen.
Well, trust me, they were a big deal.
I'm sure they were.
Around this time. But he basically did like parody movies.
Okay, so a perfect fit.
Yeah. He also, way back in the day, starred in Forbidden Planet. Sci-fi classic. But the reason he was brought in for these segments, which were comedic segments where he is looking for the Undertaker, he's trying to solve the mystery. He said he's hired by the WWF to solve the mystery of the Undertaker. Where is he really? And the reason he was hired for this is because of the Naked Gun movies. And he also had a very short-lived TV show called Police Squad, I think. This was before my time, but that is what the Naked Gun movies were based on. So he played a detective. He played a detective on that show and in these movies, and that's why he's the comedic guy looking for
All right.
The Undertaker. Now, most of these were pretty bad by today's standard.
Mm-hmm.
But as a kid, it was funny.
Yeah.
You know? And there is one that is legitimately funny when he's walking around the pool.
All right, fans, Ray Rougeau here. The Undertaker mystery is thickening. I want to start that over. I didn't like it.
There I was, heading poolside, trying to catch some rain. Sorry, Ray. The girls were feeling macho.
Macho Man, you're so big.
Easy now, girls. It's family entertainment. Yeah.
I had work to do. After all this time, I'm still tormented by that one burning question. How can there be two Undertakers? I will solve this case at SummerSlam.
The other vignettes where people are saying they saw him, you know, they're saying like, oh yeah, I saw the Undertaker. He was stopping to get some ice cream, and then he walked out, and it was the weirdest thing I've ever seen. But my favorite one is a little girl who says that she saw him at the park and he went down a slide. And I just like to picture that in my head. These kids at the playground, and then the Undertaker. So then, you know, there's a few more interview segments and all this stuff, and then the two men finally meet at SummerSlam '94. It's a very short match.
8 minutes.
Yep. And it's the main event. It's the final match.
Which is ridiculous.
Of SummerSlam. Because the real main event
was Brett versus Owen.
Right. Brothers.
Yes.
Real life brothers. Shoot brothers.
Yes. Was that the cage match?
Yes, it was.
And they had the family by the ringside all crying.
Right. So that was a big deal.
Yeah.
And a bigger deal than we know when we get into the shoot section. But so that really should have been the main event. Anytime you have a championship at stake, you'd think you want to make that.
You know.
Yeah. But so no, they went with Undertaker versus Undertaker.
Yep.
As the main event, and it was on the posters. Now, as a kid, you know, my family was not wealthy, and my mom couldn't always afford to get the pay-per-views. And usually, what I had to do was get together with a group of friends, and we'd get to somebody's house, and we'd all bring $5 or $10, and we'd pay for the pay-per-view that way. But sometimes it just didn't happen that way.
Yeah.
So for one reason or another, we didn't get SummerSlam, and I didn't get to see it. And I was bummed out. And like I said, this was before the network. It's not like you could just have the network and then watch it, you know, whenever.
$9.99 a month, and it was like $60.
Probably not that much back then. It was probably more like 30 or 40.
Yeah.
But
when I was watching 2009, 2010, they were 60, and then WrestleMania was like 80.
Yeah. No, when I was a kid, but remember inflation and all. So that $30 was probably like $50 or $60 today or whatever. So it was a big deal, and my mom wasn't always willing or able. I think she was probably willing, but not able to shell out the money. So I didn't get to see it. And I was one of the people that was actually intrigued by this matchup. Now, I knew, like I said, I was old enough to know that wrestling wasn't exactly legit. Mm-hmm. And so I knew that it was going to be a fake Undertaker versus the real Undertaker, right? But even so, I liked the story. I liked the storyline. I was interested to see what would happen.
Yep.
Right? But like I said, a lot of people looking back on it now, they're like, oh, this was stupid. This was the worst thing. This was the lowest moment in the Undertaker's career.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's true.
No.
At all.
No. I can think of like 5 off the top of my head.
Yeah. So now let's switch and talk shoot.
Okay.
For real. What was going on? The Undertaker had injured his back around the time of the Royal Rumble, maybe sometime before that. But they knew the Royal Rumble was going to be his last go for a while because he was going to take some time off to heal a back injury. And if you are familiar with the Undertaker's history, you'll know that he has fought through broken ribs and even a broken face.
Yes.
He just put a mask on and kept wrestling.
Phantom of the Opera Taker.
Yeah. So, I mean, he was not the first to do that.
No.
Virgil and Brutus Beefcake had both done that before The Undertaker. But still, that's a tough dude, right?
Yeah.
So this must have been, to put him on the shelf for 7 months almost, this had to be a legit, problem.
Especially back then. You were supposed to work through injuries,
Right. there was no press around being like, you should give these people health care.
Yeah. No John Oliver back then.
Yeah. So he needed time off. So he gets it. And creative, the people that write the scripts and come up with the plot lines for wrestling, were sitting there thinking, okay, he needs time off and we're going to bring him back, but how are we going to bring him back? And Bruce Pritchard is in on these meetings because I don't know if he's head of creative at the time or if he's just part of the process, but he's there. Also plays Brother Love, but also a big wig backstage.
Yep.
And he's sitting in the meeting and someone says, I wish we had an Undertaker-like character for him to square off against, because the natural thing is to put him against Yokozuna right away, but let's build that up a little bit. Let's save it, not right away, but, we'll have him fight Yokozuna eventually, but I wish we had like an Undertaker-like character for him to face that had similar abilities and seeming superpowers that the Undertaker has, because he.
Hold up. Where was Papa Shango in all of this?
I don't know if he was around. I think he came a little bit later.
Okay.
But that's a good point.
They're like that. Like that's a dream match right there.
Yeah. So Bruce Pritchard remembers this guy, this wrestler, named Brian Lee Harris. He goes by the professional wrestling name of Primetime Brian Lee. And he's working down in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, which was kind of like the NXT or like the minor league affiliate of WWF at the time. And he says, this guy Brian, he's always getting mistaken for the Undertaker in public, and they're talking about finding, an opponent for the Undertaker who's like the Undertaker. Well, what if we do Undertaker versus Undertaker?
I know, yeah. Brian Lee was going down one slide, was going out a slide one day. Some girl was like, that's the Undertaker.
Maybe that's what it was. Maybe that's where all the confusion came in. So that is the plan then. And they say, well, while we're doing that, we can make him a heel and have him brought in by Ted DiBiase. That makes sense because Ted DiBiase brought the Undertaker in the first place, and he's got money, and that's how he's going to do it. And this Undertaker is going to be motivated by money. It won't be the Undertaker. It'll be the Underfaker, which is a term that fans came up with. Yeah. That's not what they would have said. But just to keep it clear, from now on, we're going to call him the Underfaker. So Brian Lee is brought in. He does resemble the Undertaker. He dyes his hair and grows a beard so he can look more like him. They even go to the trouble of hiring a tattoo artist to create temporary tattoos that they can put on Brian so that his arms match and he looks like the Undertaker.
Yep.
Which was portrayed in real life. The gentleman's name is Mark Calloway. And he had real life tattoos, not fake tattoos, but they wanted to match. So they got these tattoos made. They didn't come out great, apparently. So Jerry the King Lawler touched him up by hand because he is a very good artist.
Really?
Yeah. In fact, that's how he broke into the wrestling business. He used to draw like caricatures of the wrestlers. But anyway, then Brian was friendly with Mark Calloway, the real Undertaker. And they ran it by Mark Calloway, and he was like, yeah, I'm totally down for that. That's cool. And so the two men got together, and Mark taught Brian how to be the Undertaker, all the movements and everything. That interview segment I spoke about where the Underfaker talks, and he sounds more or less like the Undertaker, that's because Mark Calloway recorded that voiceover.
Yeah.
And they played it. And then Underfaker just mouthed along, and they still hit his face, so you could only kind of see his mouth moving and only kind of tell that he didn't quite sync up on a couple spots, but he was pretty good overall, pretty good lip sync. And so that's how they kept it going. They even had the idea of having Mark Calloway come as the real Undertaker and wrestle a few matches as the Underfaker to really throw people off. Because there were people, you see the commentators now talking about it, and they're like, oh, nobody was fooled. Everybody knew it wasn't him. This guy was much smaller than the real Undertaker. But again, this was back in the day where you didn't have the network. You didn't have, you might have VHS tapes and stuff like that, but it wasn't at the tip of your fingers where you could go and look and compare the two. And when they're not standing next to each other, this guy looks pretty good as the Undertaker.
When they are standing next to each other in the match, though, he's like 2 inches tall.
Oh, you can totally tell.
But like, what I didn't get is why didn't they go through the trouble just to make like 2-inch lifts in his boots? Maybe.
Well, it's very possible that they did. And look, there's still a limit to how tall a lift can make you. I mean, the real Undertaker, Mark Calloway, is a tall guy.
Yeah.
Like I said, 6'8", 6'9", something like that. And Brian Lee is no small fry. He's 6'6". But still, you know, and he didn't have the physical mass of Mark Calloway. He was a smaller guy all around.
Yep.
So yes, when you see them standing next to each other, it's quite clear which one's the real Undertaker and which one's the Underfaker. But separately, I don't think as many people were onto it as they would have you believe.
Yeah.
Just from a storyline perspective, you could kind of figure that, yeah, okay, maybe this isn't the real Undertaker. Yeah. But visually, I think they did a pretty good job.
Yeah.
And I think Brian Lee did a good job copying the mannerisms and all that stuff.
Yes.
They do talk about, though, that Brian Lee, he had some drug problems and some other, you know, drinking problems and wife abuse problems and stuff like that in his, you know, real life. And that the way he would try to get out of it was by telling the police that he was the Undertaker. He'd say, no, I'm WWF, I'm the Undertaker.
As in, I'm doing this because I'm in character as the Undertaker, or I'm doing this because I'm Mark Calloway?
As in, I'm famous, leave me alone.
Oh, okay.
Like, let me off.
Okay, that too.
Yeah. Although according to some things that I heard, he did even say that he was Mark Calloway, not Brian Lee. I don't know if that's true, but Paul Bearer and I forget who else, but somebody, maybe Bruce Pritchard, but somebody else both stated in shoot interviews that he would do this. So it probably did happen.
Yeah. Kayfabe was a lot more precious back then.
Yeah. So there was a lot of speculation that this match wasn't supposed to be the only match they ever had, that it was supposed to continue on. Some were even speculating that the Underfaker would turn on Ted DiBiase and become a tag team partner with the real Undertaker.
That would have been great.
Yeah. But according to Bruce Pritchard, that was never in the cards. It was just a one and done match. And they do admit that the match itself was not great and it didn't live up to the hype. But Bruce Pritchard says there's a number of reasons for that. Reason number one, the Bret Hart Owen Hart match that we spoke of earlier, the one that was actually for the championship, the steel cage match, went 20 minutes over how long it was supposed to go.
I can believe that. I remember it being a long match, and Bret and Owen probably, you know.
Bret did this on purpose, definitely.
Yeah.
Because he was pissed
that
they weren't the main event. He's like, I'm the champion. This is the culmination of a big feud with my brother that we've been building for almost a year at this point. And this is supposed to be the big blow-off match, the final culmination of this. And it's for the championship, and it's in a steel cage, which was a big deal back in these days. Yeah. And they don't get to go on last. So he purposely goes over time. Now, again, this was the old days. It's not like they're just showing this on the network and they can they can do a 6-7 hour WrestleMania or something like that.
No, WrestleMania is 12 hours. Trust me.
This is back in the day where they had a hard out. They had to be done by 10:55.
Yep.
And there was if you went over your time back then, they shut you off. Don't believe me? Ask WCW. It happened to them. They went over and they had to pay back money because their main event was cut off. So Undertaker versus Underfaker only has a very limited amount of time now. And if you've ever seen an Undertaker match, you know that his entrance alone takes 10 minutes.
And it was added because they had to do the Paul Bearer theatrics with the urn and stuff.
Yes. It was a whole thing. This was also the introduction of the Druids.
Yes.
The men in hoods and gowns. Actually, I don't know if it was the introduction. They might have been on before that, but
yeah, they didn't call them Druids, though. That's something that I noticed.
They would eventually start calling them the Druids, but that's the idea. They're just hooded figures that, come out and hold torches and push caskets and do the Undertaker's, bidding and stuff, But yes, Paul Bearer comes out, does all his theatrics, resurrects the reborn Undertaker.
Yes, he has a larger than normal urn, and that is because when he took the lid off of the urn, there was a spotlight in it that came out of the urn, and he was spinning it all around, and the commentators were selling it as it was King and McMahon, And King was like, "It's freezing in here, McMahon."
Yeah.
And it was supposedly like really cold,
It was unleashing the spirit of the Undertaker.
Yes. And they had the Druids brought out the custom casket, so like it was black, rest in peace, traditional Undertaker stuff.
Right. So the Undertaker appears finally, and he is different now because he used to be wearing black and gray. Now, that's what the Underfaker is wearing.
Yes.
But the Undertaker is wearing black and purple.
Purple.
Now. Yeah. So, they have their match, but, again, Bruce Pritchard says many reasons why it was thrown off. One was because now they had a shortened time. Underfaker had worked out a whole match, and they had to throw it all out the window because they only had like 10 minutes to actually have this match. The other thing is, Brian Lee, Underfaker, is not used to working at this level of the industry. This is his first time ever main eventing a pay-per-view, a major pay-per-view. They only had 4 back in these days, generally. And this was a big deal in front of a huge crowd, in front of a huge pay-per-view crowd. And he probably kind of thought of this as his audition for the WWF. If it went well, maybe not that he was going to stay on as the Underfaker, but they'd come up with a new gimmick for him, a new character, and he would continue on. And so he was probably very nervous doing this match, which is another reason why it's probably not a 5-star classic. But the match goes on, and that's the end of it. We don't hear any more about the Underfaker, but of course, the Undertaker resumes his feud with the Whippleman stable of heel wrestlers, starting with Bam Bam Bigelow. Dispatches him and goes on to Yokozuna, where they have another casket match, and this time the Undertaker wins at Survivor Series, I think it was, of the same year. So
I believe
that wraps up that way. Brian Lee is let go from the company as soon as SummerSlam is over, but he comes back in 1997
as Chains.
And this time he's like a biker character. He's in a gang with his real-life cousins, his shoot cousins, the Harris brothers, who were also 2 very big dudes. And this is also kind of a short-lived run, and it doesn't really come to anything. Again, Brian Lee has a lot of personal problems that kind of take him out, and he still wrestles here and there to this day on independent, and outlaw shows and stuff like that. The Undertaker, of course, has gone on to have one of, if not the most legendary careers in all of wrestling. One of the most beloved characters. Still wrestling to this day, although he does seem rather reluctant to do so, and I don't blame him. He's in his 50s now.
He just had a match 1 week ago.
Yes, with another 50-year-old.
Yes, he did.
And look, there are plenty of things you can still do fabulously after 50.
Yes.
But professional wrestling is probably
not
one of them, especially after you've been doing it for, I think that Mark Calloway, before he was The Undertaker, debuted in wrestling in 84? I think so. So, I mean, this is more than 30 years. This guy has been beating himself up in the ring. Of course, we know that wrestling, yes, the punches are pulled and, there are certain tricks to it, but it still takes a very physical toll.
You cannot fake gravity.
No.
That's something you can't fake.
Right. So this is a beating that their bodies are taking. So, yes, they really need to let him retire. I don't care how much money the Saudis are giving him.
No.
And it must be a lot
of money.
I will say this, though. One thing I love about The Undertaker in these later years is he has absolutely no poker face.
No, he does not.
And for the past 5 years, maybe even longer, you can tell how he feels about everything that he does.
Yes, he does.
Because he just watch his face at the end of a match and you'll know, oh, he had a good time there. It's like, no, he knows that sucked. And this last match in particular, yes, I didn't watch any of that, pay-per-view, but I do have the network, and I did fast forward right to that match just because I wanted to check out what those two would be up to. And it was as good as you would expect it to be.
And The Undertaker knew it.
Yeah. And just before we wrap things up here, and I don't even really want to bring this up, but I feel like I have to because I know I'm going to get emails about it if I don't. There is a rumor out there that the reason Brian Lee was fired either the first time or the second time from WWE is because he was having an affair with the Undertaker's wife, in real life, that he was having an affair with his wife. But this just seems to be a rumor. I couldn't find any proof except for people saying it online. And usually, if that's the only proof you have, you know that means it's bullshit. So I don't believe that that's true. I think Brian Lee probably just had his own problems and kind of got in his own way. But before we leave this feud and all the controversy around it, whether it was a good feud or a good match or not, why don't we, as a sign of respect, because the man deserves it, let's give The Undertaker, Mark Calloway, the final word.
What did you think of the Undertaker versus Undertaker feud?
On paper, I thought it was very intriguing. I was kind of disappointed in how it ended up. It didn't get the mileage out of it that we were really looking for. But I think on paper, it was a good idea.
It took, what is it now? This is the third. Well, it's the third year, but fourth season, and so it took a long time. But I did eventually work wrestling legitimately into the show.
Slow and steady.
There we go. All right. So hopefully you guys enjoy that. Even if you're not a wrestling fan, like I said, I feel like it's still a wacky enough story that people can enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you enjoyed the show, I hope that you will share it with your friends or your enemies or anyone who loves spooky ass shit. And of course, I always appreciate those 5-star reviews on iTunes or wherever else you happen to leave them. And you can check out the website, spookyas.com, spookyasshit.com. Find us on Instagram or Twitter. We are at spookyasshit at both those places. And you can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/spookyas. Please take a moment to consider donating to the GoFundMe campaign, which I will leave up until the end of June 2019 at the very least, possibly even longer. That is gofundme.com/spookaroos19. Thank you once again, Tyler, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And until next time, don't be afraid.